It will be a week of remembrance for Senator John McCain, who died Saturday night after a year-long battle with brain cancer, just a few days shy of what would have been his 82nd birthday. His body will lie in state in the Arizona State Capitol until Thursday. Then Friday, it will lie at the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C., with 3 services to be held in Phoenix, Washington, and the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis. McCain was a 6-term senator, 2-time presidential candidate, and true hero who survived 5 years of torture as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. By his own account, he lived with few regrets.
I'm very happy with my life. I'm very happy with what I've been able to do. And there's 2 ways of looking at these things, and one of them is to celebrate. I am able to celebrate a wonderful life.
During his 35 years in D.C., John McCain developed a complicated legacy known for working across the aisle, advocating for the armed forces, and fighting to end torture. But he was also marred by his role in the Keating 5 campaign finance scandal and claims that he helped stoke political division by choosing former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin as his 2008 running mate. Over time, McCain became known as the maverick of the Senate, unafraid to break from Republicans when he disagreed with them, like perhaps his most famous vote in the Senate when he returned from cancer treatment last year to cast the deciding vote that struck down a GOP plan to repeal Obamacare. Still, his relationships with fellow Republicans remained strong.
He is loyal to his friends. He loves his country. And if he has to stand up to his party for his country, so be it. He would die for this country. I love him to death.
We will really be missing such an important voice for national unity. John McCain felt very strongly about virtually every issue that he tackled, but it was never based in partisanship.
His colleagues across the aisle, too, showed him tremendous respect.
He was an amazing man. He'll be missed. I want generations in the Senate and in the world to remember him.
It was just an honor to be in his presence and to watch the kind of respect world leaders had for him.
He had a joy about politics and a love for his country that was unmatched.
One of McCain's strongest bipartisan friendships was with Massachusetts Senator Ted Kennedy, who died 9 years to the day before McCain from the same form of brain cancer. And as Kennedy's son, former Rhode Island Congressman Patrick Kennedy notes, the pair represented a bygone era of politics.
My father genuinely loved and respected John McCain. It's an example of what we need today, again, and that is that even though they disagreed, they were always searching for ways to put their country ahead of their party.
For more on the senator's life, I'm joined by Paul DeBole, a professor of political science at Lasell College, who worked as a campaign aide to McCain, and Scott Ferson, founder of Liberty Square Group, who served as press secretary and Massachusetts Issues Director for Senator Kennedy. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Paul, let me start with you. We've chatted before. I was not aware of your history with Senator McCain. So what did you do with him? When did you work with him? And what was the experience like?
Sure. I think it was a fantastic experience. But back in the summer of 1998, I was working on the Lamar Alexander for President campaign. And I think all of the warning signs were there pretty early on that that the campaign wasn't going to proceed in a manner that we would have liked. And an opportunity, once Governor Alexander dropped out of the race, a friend of mine said, "Hey, I need some help, for John McCain." And I'm like, "John McCain, the senator from Arizona?" "Yeah." And he was at 2% in the polls in New Hampshire at that point. And I said, well, I do enjoy an underdog, so I'm going to jump onto this one. So this was pre-Straight Talk and pre his announcement.
You mean before the bus?
Before the Straight Talk Express, exactly. So I was his driver off and on from midsummer of 1999 right through to the New Hampshire primary.
Is there any one event or one experience you had with him that maybe stands out in your mind that captures who he was, looking back?
Yeah, it was funny because usually traveling with Senator McCain was this group of old prisoner of war buddies, people like Admiral Stockdale, Orson Swindle, Ed Alvarez, and when you would. And they were very, very close, and they would talk to the senator about a variety of things, et cetera. And the one thing that became apparent was I have not seen a group of more decent, kind, honorable men. Yet they had a toughness. I mean, you could talk to them for about 5 seconds and look into their eyes, and you know that you were dealing with a couple of real tough guys here. And it's certainly a toughness that most people don't have. I know certainly I didn't have.
Yeah,
so I was always impressed and somewhat in awe of that. But we would spend a lot of time going from place to place. And again, this was pre-Straight Talk Express. And he would engage me in conversations about policy issues. He would engage my 11-year-old daughter, who was occasionally in the back seat, about policy issues, et cetera. And he honestly felt as though everyone brought something to the conversation. And we would be at events, and we would be getting close to departure time, and it would be time to head off, and you try to politely usher him away from someone who would pigeonhole. And he was going to stay there and talk to that person for as long as it took until he had the benefit of that person's thought and opinion. And I think that's rare today.
Scott Ferson, when did you first cross paths with Senator McCain?
So I worked for Senator on his staff in the early 90s, and that was when they just started to get to know each other, really through Senator Kerry, because of their shared experience and their work on POW, MIA. And, Senator Kennedy, I think, and Senator McCain weren't natural compatriots, if you will. They had very different backgrounds, but they had this shared interest in the institution and in the country. And over time, Senator Kennedy started to develop his own relationship with him, which I think really grew and solidified when Senator McCain got the Profiles in Courage Award for his work on McCain-Feingold, and a real friendship started to develop there.
You mentioned that they had different backgrounds. I was going to ask you if whatever affinity they shared that you got to see firsthand was the product of similar backgrounds, because even though Senator Kennedy wasn't a military guy and Senator McCain was, they both came from these families where their forebears were known to have been incredible successes in the sort of the family business, right? Senator McCain, I think, had 2 admirals, as a father and a grandfather. Senator Kennedy obviously came from this family where there were very high expectations to live up to. So do you think, whatever the differences were, that commonality might have helped bring them closer together?
I think that was the basis of it. I think it also, what they had was a real intellectual understanding of how the body worked and how important it was. And they both viewed if Ted Kennedy was the lion of the Senate, and he was, sort of eulogized in that way when he died 9 years to the day before Senator McCain was. Senator McCain felt that too, I think, and that same reverence for the body.
I want to ask you both, there is obviously a tendency when someone passes away, especially someone who's had a remarkable life, to only focus on the positive. But people have noted, as they've sized up Senator McCain's legacy, that he was not, as few of us are, an unequivocally purely good person. It has been noted that he had, at times, a very sharp temper. He made once a sort of an off-color joke about Chelsea Clinton and her looks, which I'm not going to repeat on air. He also, at one point, had some harsh words for his wife, or in the early 90s on the campaign trail, later said he'd had a long day. Did either of you ever catch glimpses of, I guess, what might be termed his darker side, a tendency to get very angry, to lose your temper and then have to walk it back?
Well, I think we all have that tendency. There are certain things that set us off. I know I have that issue.
I would agree with that.
But the cool thing about Senator McCain is that he would go from 0 to 60 in about 2 seconds, and then go from 60 to 0 back in about 1.3. And, he would blow, he would make his feelings known, and then he would walk it back very, very quickly. And again, most of the disagreements were professional, not personal. And I think he was able to put those aside and just get back on and focus on the task at hand. And the thing that the comment that you made that I just wanted to build on for a moment is that both Senator Kennedy and Senator McCain had this incredible work ethic, and there was really no facet of legislation that kind of escaped their cognizance. They would examine the details of every policy proposal and then let them sink and swim on their own merits.
Scott, I want to ask you about the 2008 campaign against Barack Obama. This was the campaign in which he famously told a woman who had claimed that Barack Obama was an Arab that, no, he's not an Arab. He's a decent family man. That wasn't verbatim what the senator said, but that was just, let's take a little look at that. Then I want to ask you about Sarah Palin.
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No,
ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign is all about. He's not. Thank you.
I know there are some people who criticize what the senator said there as if the choice was between being, on the one hand, an Arab and on the other, a decent family man. I tend to give him the benefit of the doubt. But he has been criticized for bringing Sarah Palin into the national political fold. A lot of people who see Sarah Palin as the antecedent of Donald Trump, practitioner of more divisive politics, fault Senator McCain for doing that. And whatever they think of other things he's achieved, have trouble, I guess, giving him a mulligan on that. What's your take on the Palin factor?
Yeah, I don't think this was a conscious decision on his part for Sarah. I don't think Sarah Palin was Sarah Palin at that time. I remember seeing her at the Republican convention, the speech at that time, and thinking it was very, very powerful in the way that she connected.
I remember that speech too, but I remember that speech being very sort of proto-Trumpian. I mean, it was populist. It was a kind of a two Americas. It's us versus them. There's a culture war going on, almost like a latter-day Pat Buchanan speech. And how? I mean, he's the one who picked her, right? So if he didn't know who she was, did he fail to vet her?
Well, I think that may be it, frankly. I mean, I think, given part of the maverick aspect of it is that you do some things that are out of the box.
Right.
And also at that time, it was pretty clear, I think, that he was probably going to lose the election. So throwing a Hail Mary pass and kind of being, it seemed to, I remember being at the Democratic convention in Denver when it was announced. Nobody knew who she was.
Paul, what's your take on that as a former McCain aide?
Was it the best, in hindsight, was it the best decision you could have made? Absolutely not. I mean, I've heard a lot of news reports, too, and I remember this happening in 2008 about how I was considering crossing party lines and making Senator Lieberman his running mate. And I thought that would have been a great move at the time. And unfortunately, there were a lot of people, higher up in the campaign that didn't think that was
in fact, I think he's come to believe he should have done that.
He came to admit that. And it was funny because I was texting with Jimmy Shear the other night, who's a friend of yours, and he reminded me that John Kerry considered tapping Senator McCain as his running mate in 2004. And you often wonder how things would have been differently had that happened.
Well, maybe he should have done that, too.
All right, we've got to leave it there. Paul DeBole, Scott Ferson, thank you both for
being
here.
Thank you.
Tomorrow night, Frontline will re-air its one-hour special on John McCain and the complex legacy he leaves behind. That's tomorrow at 9 on WGBH2.